Hey, welcome to week 2 of our sermon recap groups for Immeasurably More. And I'm so pumped about how these groups are challenging each other. I love hearing the reports of groups across the Tampa Bay area taking the sermons and going even deeper. And this week, we were talking about the message from Pastor Jason Burns, where he talked about all things generosity and living a generous life. This is obviously leading us as a church to the immeasurably more that God has for your life on this spiritual journey of really trusting him and stepping out in faith, but also the more that God has for our church and the big vision that God's given us, all leading up to vision offering in just a few weeks. But I'm here with Pastor Susanna Steele and Pastor Josh Morales, and two of our great pastors here on staff. We're going to talk all things about generosity. And so we'll talk about the message on Sunday, talk about leaving a legacy. When you think of legacy, what comes to your mind, and what do you think of when you think about legacy and generosity?
I think about living for eternity and not living for right now and what's in front of us. My life verse and life, honestly, like quote is, I want to make my life, and what I want people to say about me at my funeral is that Susanna Steele, she, knew God and she glorified him in everything that I do. And so I'm just trying to fix and focus on, making sure everything that I do with my life, is it pushing me to know God or is it not? We've even talked about it in this series about not fixing our eyes on what is seen and what is right now, but what is unseen, which is eternal. And we know that even in Matthew, it talks about not storing our treasures up on this earth where that all is going to be destroyed, but storing for ourselves treasures in heaven where it will last forever. And so that's the goal. And so everything in my life, I try to filter through, like, is this going to matter in eternity or is it not? Is this event that I'm going to? Is this person I'm hanging out? Is it helping me know God and glorify him in my life, or is it not? And so I try to filter my life through that.
Yeah, that's good. As a father, legacy is my kids, right? It's eternity. And I know we've been reading the Bible reading plan, First Kings. There's lots of kings that had a bad legacy and their kids turned it around. Or there's lots of kings that had a good legacy and their kids turned it around. And historically in Scripture, there's just that one father-son duo of Asa and Jehoshaphat that I recognize, and I want that for my kids. And so, again, it's back to what's unseen. I don't want to just have that mentality. I don't know, growing up, I grew up with a, hey, do as I say, not as I do mentality. And so I don't want my kids to have that. I want to start that legacy now for my kids. And that's what that drives me.
Jason talked a lot about, when it comes to legacy, of the idea of generosity in our finances. And, money really does matter, and how we spend money matters. And it's very clear that in the scriptures, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And when it comes to a legacy of generosity, I want our church to be known for that. I want to be known for that. I always want to be known as a generous person. But part of that is also learning to let God stretch you in times where it's not easy. It's really not generosity when it's easy, when it's convenient.
Right.
But let's talk about those times where God has stretched us to step out in faith, to believe for something bigger, to give radically. When's it happened in your life?
It's fun because I, started living for the Lord fully, like in my late teens, early 20s. And so obviously that's the time, like as a young adult in the early 20s, where my finances were not in order. I did not live by a budget, and it was all a little reckless. And so there were so many times, like in following the Lord, where everyone was like, all right, you got to start tithing. And it all felt like a stretch because I was like, my finances are not in order at all. And so, but it's been cool to see over, my 20s, now going into my 30s, about how all those times in my 20s where the Lord asked me to give when it was uncomfortable, how he's like proven himself faithful time and time again. And, one of my favorite verses is 2 Corinthians 9:8. God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all times, and having all that you need, you can abound in every good work. I try to model my life after Jesus and realize that as I fix my eyes on him and as he's already given me everything and I'm just a steward, not an owner, that it's easy to model that generosity and take that stretch and give back to him. And so my role, I've realized, is just obedience. His role is provision. And so as I'm
very good.
Obedient, as I keep taking that steps of obedience and steps of faith and stretch in my giving, he always is faithful in
I
providing.
want to say that again because there's some business leaders that are watching this. There are some parents that are watching this, and that's such a great phrase. Sue, say it one more time. My role is
obedience.
Yes.
His role is provision, and he's Jehovah Jireh, our provider. He's
He
done
is.
it time and time again.
And when God does tell you to step out, whether it's helping out a family member, maybe it's tithing for the very first time and trusting God by putting God first in your life, it's a step of faith that scares you. But that's what faith is.
Yeah.
Faith is doing things that don't make sense because God told us to and watching him come through for it. And by the way, most of our beliefs according to the scripture, don't make sense.
Right.
He was born of a virgin. He came back to life. He walked on water. Like there's so much. If you want everything to make sense, Christianity is not the thing for you.
Yes.
We serve a God that is out of the box that we don't really understand. And he tells us to do things that are countercultural, counterintuitive, but they work out. And that's how we experience life and life to the full.
So good.
Pastor Josh?
No, yeah, that's good. Same story. I was 21, Bible college, engaged, and my great grandfather had passed away. And for me, all of the grandchildren received a $5,000 gift, and me that was like the most money I'd ever seen. And so I went out and bought Disneyland tickets. I'm just kidding about that. But no, we decided we were going to tithe and then even go above that. The church we were at, Phoenix First Pastors College, Pastor Barnett, he had a vision. They were actually at that moment building the new youth facility, and they had asked people to take a step of faith and purchase a youth seat to help fund that seed. And it was $1,000 per seat. And I remember my wife and I discussing it, and we didn't have a lot of debt. We just had a little bit of student loans at the time, but we said, we're going to tithe on it, but then we're going to go above and beyond that. And we bought 2 seats, and for us, 21 years old, $2,000 was a ton of money, but it wasn't even a question. And that's what I loved about it, because God was God, and we knew who he was at the time we wanted to be youth pastors, and we're so, hey, we're going to sow into this seed faithfully. And it was just amazing to see God do that. And then miraculously after that, you've heard the stories, like our student loan was paid off, and it was good. And we didn't do it for that reason. Right. Absolutely not. But God is a generous God.
He is a generous God. And when we are walking in generosity, we are showing his nature and working on it, becoming who like God is. Right. And that is so valuable for your life. And I would challenge you, when I think of the people that have made the biggest impacts, that have raised great families, have built great businesses, there is always that one central theme in all of them. And it is that they took steps of faith in generosity. And they believed God, and they tithed, and they did above and beyond giving. I remember when I got saved at 16 years old, God, challenged me. One of the very first things to do was to start giving my first. I was working at McDonald's, making $4.15 an hour. And I mean, that's, not a lot of money, but as a 16-year-old, writing that, and I actually had to write a physical check. Some of y'all don't know what a physical check is. Like actually write it every single week from my little Regions bank account. Nope. And then I remember when God challenged me to go above and beyond that and give to missions. And there was an organization that was doing work in Africa, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my part. I'm gonna give them $25 a month. And I supported that organization, and I'll never forget, I don't know if I've ever shared this before, but I was on the day of my graduation. One is when I got the huge call to go to Sri Lanka, but at the same time, the guy that I was supporting in Africa for now, it was 6 or so years, his name was Reinhard Bonnke, he was a hero of the faith, was sitting on the front row of my graduation. And I got to go up and meet him. And I remember meeting him thinking, you know what? I've supported this guy in his ministry with my little seed and he's sitting there and got to pray for me as I started full-time ministry.
Awesome.
And it was so cool how God recognizes when we take those steps of faith. So
good.
All right, let's talk about overcoming selfishness. And Jason is so good at talking about how the idea that when you walk in generosity, you overcome greed and selfishness, and you stop making it about you, start making life about other people. How do we get over selfishness?
Yeah. I always say that selfishness doesn't ever shout, it whispers. And a person that is selfish doesn't really recognize that they're selfish because it's all the little small things, right? And so for me, I realize I'm being selfish when the small things come up. When I feel myself getting agitated all of a sudden because someone's interrupting my day or interrupting my schedule, or if I feel myself trying to avoid any big commitments or things that are going to inconvenience me, or even when it comes to, my finances. And I've just realized though, selfishness honestly kind of creeps up, not with just my finances, but with my calendar and just being inconvenienced. And so I regularly have to just like ask the Lord to like bring that stuff to the surface. One of my favorite verses and my prayers that I pray regularly is from Psalms 139, where it says, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me, know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting." And I pray that prayer and I ask the Lord, hey, bring to the surface, like, why is it that I'm being agitated? Why is it that I feel inconvenience? Why is it that I'm feeling this way? And usually he just reveals the root of it. And a lot of times when it comes to selfishness, the root of it is like fear with our finances, or if it's pride. But regardless, when I think about it, I have to realize that I'm not looking for like behavior modification. I'm looking for a heart transformation. And I'm asking the Lord to transform my heart and get rid of this selfishness so that I can live a life of generosity. And again, like fixing our eyes on Jesus, like he gave it all. And so when we model our lives after him, it helps us rid ourselves of selfishness and give freely right back in return. So
yeah, and I look to how to overcome selfishness. You can be looking at the defining word of generosity, right? It's being ready to do more than expected. So I can't be caught off guard if I want to live a selfless life. I have to be ready. I have to wake up and say, okay, God, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be ready. I'm going to have an eye on an opportunity that when I'm in line at Starbucks, I'm going to pray for somebody. I'm not going to just be like, hey, I'm so busy, I got to go, I got to get my coffee, and I'm out of here. I got to be ready.
I love that. We're going to close it out with the 3 challenges that Jason gave on Sunday when it comes to, intentional generosity, intentional giving, sacrificial giving, and then the extravagant giving. I mean, those 3 are so significant for every person's life. And honestly, I'm challenged. I'm challenged to go from intentional, which is obviously tithing, putting God first.
Right.
It's planned, to, the idea of sacrificial, to that extravagant. Obviously, the story of the lady who pours the oil on Jesus' feet, and none of it made sense.
Right.
But I love how Jason talks about this idea. It doesn't make sense, but it's how the Lord is honored when we walk in extravagant generosity. So, man, what's the challenge of how to go to the next level when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think you already kind of said it. Intentional giving is setting aside the money, the finances, and even your time and calendar. It's like I'm already setting aside Sundays. I'm going to serve. That's what my life is going to be about. I'm going to set aside a week of the night where I'm going to be committed to being in a Bible study community and pouring out, And then we go from intentional to then, the sacrificial. That's what cost us something. It's not just set aside and like scheduled in my calendar and my budget. It's like, I'm going to go even when it's inconvenient for me. I'm going to give even when it's a struggle. I'm going to start serving even when I feel like I'm in a crisis and it's hard for me to pour out. I'm still going to pour out. And then the extravagant is like what you were talking about, even as a 16-year-old. You were like, when it was tough and you were already tithing, you were still trying to give to that Africa missionary and still trying to go above and beyond. So it's like outside of the regular, outside of, even the sacrificial, finding ways to really go out of our way to bless other ministries, serve other ministries, and glorify the Lord. And I feel like every time in my life when I've moved from one level to the other, it was just deeper invitations from the Lord to trust him and
That's really good.
To really just put him first. And each level I felt like when I see like the faithfulness, when I look back, like when I see the faithfulness of God, the fear that prevents us from stepping into these new levels fade. And I look at how he's been faithful time and time again, all that fear fades. And it's like just a new level of intimacy with him, trust in him. And then, all of it brings a deeper fulfillment and deeper joy that I've never experienced, before.
I love that.
So.
Amen. Yeah, I guess I'd like to just speak a little bit to the first part, that intentional. So, because maybe you're in here and you're watching and you've never given. And so I liken it to this of just take that first step.
Yes.
It is a faith step,
Yep.
But you're going to walk in it and you're going to walk in obedience and you're going to see God's faithfulness.
Yes.
For my kids have grown up and they've always worn a seatbelt. It's never been an option. I've never felt to fight my kids for a seatbelt.
That's good.
But same with giving. Like you're going to see that as you first do it, it's going to be a difficult step, but then it's just going to be routine. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. This is where I'm going to go.
That's good.
And I do want to challenge y'all, just like Jason did on Sunday. Like if you've never taken the 90-day tithing challenge, this is a perfect opportunity for you. We equip you with videos and resources to help you through the journey. We understand that this is a massive faith step for you, but this is what Immeasurably More is all about.
Right.
This is not some money campaign. This is an idea for you to grow in your faith, to really believe God for more.
Yes.
And I just don't buy into anyone that says God's got my life, but he doesn't have my money. It's like, no. That shows a lot. Like, man, put your treasure in the things of God.
Yes.
And it starts with our tithe. It starts with that intentional giving to say, you know what, God, you're first in my life. And then there's moments of sacrifice. And then there's going to be moments like our vision offering in just a few weeks of extravagance.
Yes.
And just going, you know what, God, I'm going to do a gift that's going to stretch me. It's going to build the church. It's your 2 seats that you bought in the youth center. And those kind of things that God continually challenges us with. But as you do that, I want you to watch how God's hand is on your life. You can never outgive God.
So
and when
true.
I give extravagantly, it's stretch for me. When I do that, I always look at it as a seed.
Yes.
And it's not a seed that I'm expecting the fruit back in my own life, even though
Right.
sometimes God does that. Sometimes God does bless our lives because of it, or help protects our family in unique ways that we don't know about. The favor of God happens. I think of it as a seed into
Yes.
eternity. Lives changed. Katie and I have made it a point
Right.
to invest sacrificially into every campus that has launched at Radiant. And that's been tough for us because we've launched a lot of campuses. And every time we do, we're like, okay, this is going to cost our family personally. There's things we can't do because we want to invest in this. But every time then I drive by that campus or I see the result and I go,
Yes.
oh, we have a seed in that ground. We're part of that. So
good.
thank you for being generous. Thank you for being part of this process together. Communicate with your teams, talk with those in your small group so that we can learn and grow together when it comes to these levels of generosity and really believing God that there is more that he has for your life, for what he wants to do through you and what he wants to do through your church.